Good evening and welcome to the Historical Commission meeting. It's Tuesday, April 16th, and it's 6:30. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made whether perceived or unperceived by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. Can I please have a roll call?
Carrie A. Ash, clerk.
Joyce Rodriguez, member.
Rick Mancini, member.
Kristen Cantera Olivera, chair.
Patty Rigo, member. I wasn't sure if I was vice chair today.
So the one thing I did forget to bring, to actually have you print out was the minutes. So we're gonna bump the minutes to the next meeting, because we don't have them. Okay, correspondence. First up, 277 Lincoln Avenue. I did receive a message from the owner of 277 Lincoln Avenue, and he's doing renovations to the building. It's not in the district, and that was the question the building inspector had. So he is saving the building. He's just doing some changes. He's changing the windows and the doors and the siding. But since it's not in the district, and he's not demolishing anything, there was no need for us to do anything. So I just sent him a letter saying that was fine. Second, so letter of support for Wampanoag Mill at 69 Alden Street. That was their ongoing tax credit letter that we send them periodically. So again, I just sent out that letter. Mbta Positive Train Control Project. So this was something that I received in the mail, and they're sending it because they're going to be putting little, not really towers, but antennas at certain points along the train tracks, and it's not affecting any historic properties. So there's really no need for us to come. If you want to see it, I can send it to you.
I would like to do that.
Yep.
At least get a review.
Yep, that's fine. I didn't bring it with me, but I will. So they're just looking for comments, so I can get that out. I'll send it to all of you, and we can review that. But I just got it the other day, so. Okay, budgets, expenditures, gifts, donations. We have none. Still. Fingers crossed, someday. Open bank account, so I still need to get down to City Hall with Carrie, maybe this week, Carrie?
Sure.
Since I'm on vacation.
May I just ask a question about donations? Like, so in what what would we do with money if it was donated? Like, what kinds of things would we do?
We could possibly use it to put more into our PowerPoint presentation,
Okay.
or things that we want to do if we wanted to make brochures, things like that. Any kind of expenditures that we would possibly use, or just
I'm in marketing,
anything
so I
that
just
we
like to know.
see coming up for future projects. Just
Okay.
to have the money there. I mean,
Perfect.
anything that we could do.
Have
But
we ever
right now it's not.
put a donate button on our Facebook or mentioned anything like I wouldn't even know that we would accept donations, would that be something that we could like post
I don't know.
about? Or-
Again, that's something that we have to.
Just curious,
Yeah,
like.
we would have to.
Because
talk
people
with
are
them.
passionate about historic preservation, and there is the Historical Society, which people always confuse with this. And I think, I'm not saying I want to take money away from them and their organization, but I could see us doing, I think the brochure or a pamphlet just kind of highlighting, I think one of the last things that came out of the last meeting was about developers and how to make developers not want to tear down a property, and how to incorporate it and how important that is, and how to make Fall River a little more, highlight the positive and maybe let the negative just sit with itself. So like brochures or something could be interesting to just, if we wanted to ever consider putting out just like a really soft call for like,
Right.
you know.
And I mean, it would be beneficial because doing the neighborhood group thing, will get out to the citizens, but not so much developers, so at least something like that to have that we could send to them even.
Yeah.
would be-
And I know it's on the agenda for later, but, you know,
Mhm.
but it's been mentioned every time I've been here about the possible merger of this group with the Historic District Commission, I'm tired. And that would give us even more, you know, it's gonna make us, that consolidation would make this group even a little more important, a little bit more pointed in what
Right.
it does. So just to kind of, I do fundraising, so I was just interested in when I.
No, good, that's a good,
You know.
and that's
So-
something that we can ask.
How are we going to let people know that? You say through Facebook?
Well, I know we have a Facebook page, which I do follow. I'm an admin on it, and we get good traction, and every time I'm inviting people to it, and I think there are ways to use it. I think that's probably the most effective. I also think Instagram would be really nice, you know, if we have, because just to feature historical properties. I do that on my own thing that
Oh,
I
yeah.
do. But I think it could be, and it's very simple just to set up a donation page, and if somebody feels moved to give us $10 or whatever, like, I'm not saying go, you know, full out on a capital campaign or something, but just letting people know that,
Not yet.
yeah, I like how you think, but just letting people know that there are other groups that are there are things to highlight, and then New Bedford does a really good job of highlighting, putting that in people's faces. And I think we could do a little bit of a better job, and I'm not talking about from a city perspective, from a historical,
Right.
what do we have that people would like to come and visit? We have lots of things,
We do.
so.
The only thing I would advise is maybe Carrie, who could check and see if it's legal or how that can be applied. Are we, because we are a city commission,
We're a city commission,
And
we're
we
not a
accept-
nonprofit.
that's right, can we accept those types of donations?
Mhm.
I'm
We
going to
should
just
clarify
open it
that
up
first.
in this way, that you don't want to position yourself in such a way that donations look like bribery.
No, right.
Oh, no, but donations
But
that are
there-
put through, like there's like, you know, rules that you put on there, and people have, it's just, it's
And
a,
what
But
are those
in-
rules? Because if
But
there's
in the
a,
ordinance, there is something about us accepting donations that we are able to do that. So if you read through some of the ordinance, it is in there, but it's something that we would have to sit down.
well, I know
and
the
talk
school
to,
department takes donations. If you look at the school committee meeting reports, at the end, you'll see different donations that come in, maybe a company that wants to give computers, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But as I say, when Mr. Mancini is talking about the fact we're not a nonprofit, we're a
Mhm.
city commission, so what's the criteria for that?
Right. But if you remember 8084 North Main, somebody was willing to donate a building to us.
But that was
And-
controlled by the mayor also, so I think it's just a matter of
Mhm.
getting
Oh, no,
to
just-
our legal
Right,
department
right,
and
and that's
asking
what
the
we'd have to
question,
do, yeah.
Mhm.
Carrie, and then.
Yeah, can
So
can
there
we
is-
get that
there is-
information?
There is a
Or
way
down,
for us
yeah.
to do that. It's just we would have to look further into it, because we never got to that point. We never, you know, first thing we have to do is open the account, so we never got that far in the discussion yet, but it's definitely something we should keep on the agenda. Anything else about that? Okay. Citizen input, do we have any? Okay. Public hearings and determinations, we have none as of right now. Notice of intent to demolish structure, we have, 847 Pleasant Street, which the Pilgrim Mill, that expired September of 2017. And it is still standing, so as long as it's still standing, I'm just gonna keep it on here and keep checking in every month on it and make sure that it's still there. There's talk that it may be used for something in the future, but nothing concrete at this point. So B, 26 Barrett Street, this was a garage demo request that we received, and you all have a picture of it. The property itself, 26 Barrett Street, is on the historic, it's on the significant structures list. And it's a tenement house, it's a two, like a side-by-side tenement house. And So that property is historic, but they're not touching the house, it's just the garage that they would like to demo.
And are they gonna
So-
put anything in its place? What's the purpose of the demo?
Carrie, did he say?
I forgot what he said. I think it was just so dilapidated.
I think
it was that scenario.
My guess is
Wanted
gonna
it
be
down.
for parking as well, because it's really tough to park in that area. But,
Is the intent to build another in its place?
I don't know.
When people put forth intent to demolish, do they ever have to go back to this is a historic, significant structure, excuse me. Were there plans that when I'm not using the right words, but when, were there architectural plans of the house and the barn or whatever this was? Is there a way to look back and see if this was an intentional structure? When did it come onto the property? Is there a way to
It would be
determine
rare
that?
that they'd have that
Yeah,
information. They don't hold on to things forever.
And we don't have to, we don't have to look into anything, to see, the history of that lot.
if it
You know
were,
what I mean?
the house itself, if there was something that we wanted to
Mhm.
know about it, we could probably look up the history on it, but this is just that particular garage.
Ah,
To answer your
So-
question, the Registry of Deeds,
That's
If this
what I was looking,
garage-
thank you, that's what I was looking for, deed, I'm sorry.
if this property was, or this garage was there at the last transfer or on the original,
Okay.
it would show that, there'd be a plot plan with that showing, that building. That would answer your question.
Yes, thank you. All those words are the words I was searching for in a roundabout way. Thanks.
But that's what I mean, if we really wanted to know more about the property.
Yeah, I'm not specifically saying that, that would be a procedure I
Yeah.
would want us to do for this particular building, which looks like
Right.
it probably should
Right.
come down for safety. But I mean, just in the future, I just wanted to kind of wrap my head
I
around
don't
it.
even know that it looked particularly unsafe. I honestly don't know. I couldn't really get that close, there was a truck parked right in
Mhm.
front of it, and it was really hard to.
Well, do you want to table that till next month? And that way we can run up and take a look at that? Is that what you're asking?
I was just more specifically looking at the procedure that we go about when we talk about demolishing the structures. I mean, in the past meetings, I just wanted to know what I should be looking for. Is it just yes, we can let this go, or just kind of, it was just more of a procedural question.
Yeah.
I'm fine with this, if it's not about the house and the house is what is historical, then it doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, I mean, it may have been a barn at one point, but would they have put a barn for a 6-tenement house, generally?
Well, it depends on the owners, I would imagine, when they built the structure.
Hmm.
But I have personally, I have no quarrels about this
Mhm.
being removed.
Right.
This is not a significant
Mm-mm.
building. It doesn't
No,
present itself as unusual.
right.
Mhm. I trust your assessment.
Right.
Yeah, it's, the photo doesn't do it true justice, but it doesn't look like it's a really strong,
Yeah.
solid.
Yeah.
No,
garage
it
type of
doesn't.
structure,
I mean,
so-
to see it up close
Yeah.
to it really doesn't, I mean, it doesn't look like it's in imminent danger of falling down. It just doesn't look like it's particularly,
Sure. Well,
um,
if you want to just move on with it, I'll make a motion that we allow the demolition of this particular building.
And I second that.
okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. I will, are you able to let him know you have his information?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll call you. I
Okay,
saved it.
thank you.
Thank you for clarifying the parameters. I just wanted to know, in the future, what I should be
Yeah.
thinking about, or,
When we, generally, when something like this comes up and it's on the list, I or somebody else will go out and take pictures, and then we can.
And kind of assess
You
and
can
see,
see
yeah.
from the pictures, you can really, I mean, if this looked like, wow, this is an amazing thing, then of course we'd have a different,
Okay.
a different
Excellent.
way of going about it, but sometimes it's not necessary to do that,
perfect.
so.
Thank you.
Request for exemptions, we have none. Okay.
I would like to make a motion at this point that we take the new business, Oak Grove Cemetery, and move it up so that gentlemen can present and be on their way.
Yeah.
I second that motion.
Okay, motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? Okay. Please come forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I live right now.
Well, we're gonna be here all evening, just.
No.
This'll take us till
This is the
9
abridged
Yeah,
version.
no. Good evening, thank you for having us. My name's Sean Ferry, I'm the Director of Community Maintenance.
I'm Chris Perino, the Director of Cemeteries and Trees.
So we wanted to be here tonight to present you with this packet that Chris has done extensive work and research on, explaining the Oak Grove Cemetery expansion project that we've been working on. Over the years, Oak Grove has become tight as far as room. We're at the point now where we need to act in order to make sure that we can ensure that Oak Grove Cemetery stays open for future years to come. At this point, we wanted to make sure that you had the information that we have already presented to the park board and gotten approval for to move forward and get your input on that. We're here to answer any questions. Now, it is a lot of information, as we said, so if you'd like to take that back, chew on that for a little bit, take a look at it, and then if you needed us to attend a future meeting, we'd be more than willing to do that. So, but if you have any questions, or if, Chris, you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, just a quick overview of the project is, our thought process is taking it kind of in a twofold approach. The first is an expansion of our traditional burial lots. So in the packet of information I've provided to you, it breaks down that inventory. It is very limited. If you look at our average number of burials per year, we have about 2 years worth of grave lots available for purchase. So we're in a position where we really need to act, and we need to act quickly in order to make sure that inventory is ready once our current inventory starts to dwindle. Most importantly, the 2 grave lots tend to be the most popular purchases. We only have 2 of them left if we don't undertake this expansion. And then the second is a columbarium project to create a garden, a columbarium garden in Oak Grove Cemetery to inter cremains. Those cremains or ashes would be interred above ground. There are pictures in this packet of information there for you as well. I'm happy to go over all of the slides, answer any questions, kind of take your lead on this here. There's a lot of information
Yeah.
here. so-
Yeah, there's a lot
There's a lot of
there.
interesting information. I'm like,
Yeah.
I live right on Ward Street, so I'm trying to see where this is, because
So-
obviously I've seen I was wondering what, actually, because obviously I was really sad to see the wall go down, the stone wall. It was taken down right next to Kimwell.
Oh, okay.
So I just was wondering, like, is that like water, or is this the expansion, or is this
That
like
is
pipes?
a
also
water
the
project.
drainage.
The
Yeah.
drainage,
Yeah,
yeah,
the
it's
drainage
just been going on
project.
for a while.
That's separate
Yeah,
from
oh.
this here, yeah.
Right. So the expansion we're looking at as far as traditional burials are going to occur in 2 different locations in the cemetery. The first is on what we call the D lot. So there is a map here. It's kind of on the left side of the cemetery. That's an existing lot with graves already positioned on that lot, but there is,
You talking about the D lot?
yes.
Okay, I see that.
Yep.
here.
Yes.
And then on the flip page there's a picture looking south across that lot. So again, this is already existing. In the foreground where the tree is, there's extra space there that probably should have been accommodating already a 2 grave lot, but wasn't in its design. So we would like to add 12 additional double grave lots on that particular lot. So it's really just a matter of offering those available to sale. There's no work involved.
Oh.
There's
I was gonna
already
say,
space there.
there's
Yeah,
graves
it's
around
okay,
it.
yeah.
I was like,
Yeah,
so, okay, so I
So that's-
understand, so it's just offering them up, like, they're not on your current
They're not
list.
in
no,
our inventory.
exactly,
I
exactly.
get you.
That's gonna immediately add those 2 grave
Yeah.
lots that are, as Chris said, are the most popular. This is really a multi-pronged approach to the expansion of Oak Grove Cemetery. These two options here are going to get us immediate results and allow for some breathing room to further discuss and present a larger expansion project going forward in the future.
As, I'm speaking for myself as a
Certainly.
historic commissioner.
Certainly.
Some of the things that have been done in the Oak Grove Cemetery have been just beyond comprehension, in my opinion. The cemetery, if the number's correct, it's about 1 of 8 in the whole country. It's a park cemetery. And just looking at this D lot, that section seems to be just taken away from the concept of Homestead's original park design. So, and I'm not against expansion, and, you know, and I understand the difficult parameters that you're working under. Truly, fully understand and can sensitize and sympathize with that. However, is there any way that you can take these square lots that have been planted here, and as a director of trees, right, can you get some good sturdy trees, some oaks, some maples planted in there to offset some of that openness that's there? If you drive by Oak Grove's, on Oak Grove Avenue, and you just look down, there's just a mass, open,
Yeah.
barren area.
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you, ironically enough, I used to pedal through that cemetery 4 times a day going to school when I was a youngster.
It's beautiful.
That's going back, let me see, 77, so that's going back about 65 years ago, or better. And it was a beautiful cemetery, all the trees, and we pick it up on Locust Street and exit on Oak Grove Avenue. And it was always picturesque. And what's happening is we're losing a lot of the trees, okay? And is there, I guess, can we get the tree planting that's being done in the city? Would they volunteer to plant new trees in the cemetery?
Right.
That would ease the burden from your shoulders, and also enhance that park. I'm calling it a park because that's what it really was built as. It's not a true cemetery, it's a cemetery park.
Right.
Sure.
You know?
So one of there's certainly an undertaking in which we could plant more trees. As far as it being an immediate thing that could be done, it poses some difficulties. If we start planting trees on lots in which we're interring bodies, the root systems compromise available lots. So,
Excuse me,
But-
if you could just not throw them randomly out there.
Sure.
Replacing the trees that are coming down, so that you're not going to disturb, you're gonna be putting them in place of an existing tree.
So each month I meet with the Fall River Street Tree Planting Program, the folks that you're speaking of, and I share your sentiments, and it is a beautiful cemetery still, and I understand your concerns. You're not alone, as you said, you voice your own opinion, but there's a lot of people that feel the same way as you do, that over the years, some things aesthetically in the cemetery have changed as far as the way it's set up, and I'll get back to that in a minute. But as far as the Fall River Street Tree Planting Program, so we meet monthly. I actually have a meeting with them this Thursday. They're always ready and willing and able to plant trees wherever there's space available, and people are willing to do that. Now, to Chris's point, some of the lots are very rigid as far as what's available. So, but I'm sure if we took some time and we took a look at the cemetery and the lots that are barren with trees that might not have any, or some that have come down over the years that we could try to replace, and we found the right spots where they're not going to interfere with people who are already interred, where the root system will grow in, and or open space that we don't have enough room to maybe make some new lots, or not lots, but new plots on, that we could fit a tree here and a tree there, and see how many we can come up with, how many of those locations. I don't think in any way it's a harm. I think what the Fall River Street Tree Planting Committee has done also over the years is, as you see in the city, where you have these giant oaks and elms that are growing in sidewalks and tearing them up. What they've now done is they pick the right species and the right type of tree. There are trees
Right.
that'll grow a certain height, there are trees that root systems grow straight down, some grow out, and we have an arborist that we work with to make sure that we're making sure we pick those right trees. So that would be another part of that process, trying to find those spaces, pick the right species of trees. I think there might be some select areas where we could put those big, nice oaks and elms that, you know, when we're all gone.
That were part of the original
Right.
homestead design.
Right, exactly.
We're trying to maintain.
But I think we could definitely find some areas where we could do that, and explore that avenue for sure. Getting back to, you know.
So is that saying that you'll get the tree committee to do that and maybe report to us in a few months?
Sure, I can do that.
That's what we've done.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll talk to them. I know as far as doing the work and putting the trees in place, they have no issue with that. Locating the right spots and procuring the trees. So we'd have to purchase the trees. We have to make sure we have the right funding source for that and that we have enough. Because we do have a number of scheduled plantings already coming up this spring and summer. But we could look for that and see how many we could probably get in. And then, I mean, if we can only do a small sample size this year, maybe we can continue that each year, maybe try to put 3, 4, or thereabouts, or maybe more if possible, each year until we get to a point where we've filled up all those gaps that I'm speaking about as far as where there's, you know, it's kind of barren and, as you said, it's just a wide open expanse where you don't see any trees or foliage or whatnot.
And I know in the recent past too, the Friends of Oak Grove, when they were a little more active, had
Yeah.
done some plantings.
Yep.
There was a recent planting near the office at the top of Oak Grove, and then also there was some plantings on a lot over by the Locust Street side of the cemetery. So there have been some new trees, and it's definitely something that we should look into. I know since I've started in the cemetery, we've taken down more trees than we planted, but the trees that we've been taking down definitely pose a safety
Yeah,
risk.
they've needed to, yeah.
They need to come down.
There's no
Yeah.
question about that, but we have the availability of getting these tree planting groups to put trees in at probably no cost to the city, and maybe it'd be.
Well, we have the tree farm, and not to interrupt your thoughts, Mr. Mancini, but I also happen to be a member,
Yeah,
as you know.
Yes, ma'am.
With the Fall River tree planting.
sure.
I would ask, what do the Friends of Oak Grove Cemetery say about this expansion? AKA President, I believe it's still Mike Keane.
Right. I haven't heard from them. I've talked to a few of their members in passing about the ideas, and the few members that I have.
And
to-
he's also a member of Fall River Tree Planting, so we've got a lot of overlap and a lot of support, as
Certainly.
you well know.
Yes.
And our big project right now is to try to bring Snake Hill back to its original.
Correct.
I spent the day here, I'm probably gonna get a desk very soon.
Maybe paycheck, hopefully, huh? If it keeps up.
Not quite, but the tree farm is available,
Yeah.
and we have the resource at no cost to the city, and we have volunteers that will plant the trees.
Certainly.
So you're right, we're ready to go.
Yeah.
When you're ready to have us get in there. And so you've got your Friends of the Fall River Tree Planting, Fall River Friends of the Cemetery,
Yep.
and the tree planting program. They're overlapping in many areas, so we're ready to go.
Certainly.
My only comment on this is that I'm looking at the fact that existing plots will have 5 years of graves available. So are we saying in 5 more years, we're gonna be back here trying to figure out how to expand again?
Well, no, that's the intent, as I said earlier, as a multi-pronged approach. So this will give us that 5 years to be able to open up that discussion, and the larger expansion project, I'd like to see all of those groups that you just mentioned and then some involved in. So, you know, get input from everybody, let's vet that out the right way. I think if we pull the trigger on a larger scale project, there's always gonna be some people who might not be happy with this or might not be happy with that. This is gonna buy us that time to be able to vet that process out, have that discussion openly with everybody involved, and then when we reach those impasses, we can find a way to figure out the best solution with everybody involved. I don't wanna give ourselves a short period of time where some of those issues can't be resolved. I think with the 5 years that this will buy us, it's gonna allow us to be able to do that, and ensure that the cemetery stays open for
And
years
some
to
of the
come.
immediate things are, i.e., you take a tree down, you've got tree committees, people that are willing to go in there at no expense to your department or the city, and take that old stump and things that are out or whatever, and put a new tree in there. And what we're going to do is start enhancing the quality of that cemetery as a whole, and bring it back to, you know, I'm an old timer, I've been around, I'm not gonna have a lot more years, but I got grandkids that are really into the city. I have grandkids that live right next to the cemetery. One's in architecture. And, you know, they love that place. And it's a shame to take a historic park where there are very, and this is, you guys have heard this over and over, so I don't want to beat it to death. But it just sometimes puts me in wonder as to why we allow these things to deteriorate when we have such a valuable resource here. Maybe not today, but, you know, or not as much today, but in a few more years.
I think that's part of this discussion too, is my goal and working with John and other members of the administration is to extend the life of Oak Grove Cemetery as much as we can, because that allows us to put money into our perpetual care accounts. That allows us to maintain staffing at Oak Grove Cemetery. I mean, DCR put out a long publishing on historical cemeteries that I've read through, and they make note that as soon as a historic cemetery has to close down as far as being an active cemetery, it moves from being an asset to a liability for the city. So there are things that need to be done in Oak Grove Cemetery to improve its historic preservation, but we need to be able to maintain it as an active cemetery, so we're putting money into that perpetual care so we have the funds to expend to do those things.
Okay,
So
two more questions. What is the status right now of the North Main Street Cemetery? Is that closed off? Is that a cemetery that has outlived its space? And
the North Burial Ground?
North Main.
Yes, so that is it's no longer an active cemetery. There are some families who still have some available space for burial.
So that was a cemetery that was closed off, so to speak, because of space?
Correct, yes. All of the lots there are owned currently, so there's no inventory to sell. The big open space you see was a pauper's field, so there's interments there. We did an interment back in August of last year to a family who owned a grave there for, you know, a long period of time. So the only burials we're doing there are mainly cremations into already owned family lots.
Okay, the other comment is, as I said, we're ready to roll on these projects. But I would definitely expect that once this happens and we're ready to do it, the key part of maintenance is watering those trees. Because I see years of work that we've done in the city of Fall River, and it hasn't beautified the area because watering and maintenance has not happened after that. And I'm referring specifically to Eastern Avenue, which I travel on daily. Brayton Avenue for one. So I would like some assurance that once this work starts, that you have the staff in the cemetery to do the watering and to do the maintenance.
Sure.
Do you have that?
Since
Do you have that staff?
since I started last May, we've increased to a full complement of laborers in the cemetery. We've also made some significant improvements to our equipment to make our work much more efficient.
Yeah,
So
I'm adamant about it because I know the previous director didn't have that kind of staff. And if we're going to continue to do this and not get the results that we want, I mean, this is just...
So to answer your question and strengthen a point that you had made earlier, so unfortunately, too often, we see in life in general, not just in the city, you can't see it from my house, mentality kind of takes hold, okay? And a few years back, we had a controversy at Oak Grove, and we won't rehash that, I won't even speak of what it was. but we all know about that, okay? And once that took place, it really put an onus and shined a light on some of the things that you spoke about and how, you know, things hadn't been possibly maintained the right way, and some things had been done and not done that needed to be or not done. So since that point, we have made a conscious effort to continue to build the staff at Oak Grove, invest in the equipment, and start to change that mentality that once was, and get the cemetery back to a point where it needs to be. And I had said that at one of the park board meetings back then. We need to do this work. For years, it took years to get to the point we were at that moment, and it's going to take some time to get to where we need to be. But we are getting there, and we've made strides each year, and we'll continue to make those. And as far as the manpower, park department, cemetery, DPW, all part of an umbrella division department, which is called DCM, and each of the divisions within it. So in that sense, we share those resources. So DCM with parks, cemeteries, DPW, we can work together to try to make sure if possibly Chris is busy on that day and his men are tied up doing one other thing, I can get a couple of guys over there with the watering truck to help that process. So I understand exactly where you're coming from. I know on Eastern Avenue, we removed a lot of those trees. But speaking with our arborist, Davies Tree and Elizabeth, she is unbelievable.
Because it's the gateway to the city.
Yeah, some of those trees weren't the right trees that were supposed to be planted there. They shouldn't have been planted there. But it's neither here nor there at this point. So we did have to remove some. But we make sure we work diligently to make sure that doesn't happen again. That's, you know, we don't want to repeat our mistakes of the past. So we've done, you know, a lot of work to get back to where we should be, to answer some of those questions, and they're valid concerns. They are absolutely valid concerns. And then just one other point I'll make real quick on this. This isn't something new. You know, cemetery running out of space or needing to expand. This has been years before any of us were even here. Okay, so I mean, if you look back at some of these older sections, they're laid out in that row style. Okay, this was well before any of us or even my parents were born. So it's not something new, but it is very important that we maintain, you know, that look. So if we can't necessarily lay it out in that Olmsted style because space isn't available for that, we can definitely try to make amenity changes, as you said, with trees or, you know, shrubs in different areas to make it, you know, dress it up and give it that more park-like feel to it. So I think we'll never be at a point where we can get back to that wide open sprawling spaces where, you know, you have lots that are symmetrical, but I think we can make those small types of tweaks, and that'll be part of the larger expansion discussion as well going forward, how it's laid out, what kind of foliage are we going to have, what kind of trees are we going to plant, and things of that nature. So
To bring up something else,
Yes.
and I don't know if it's already been brought up by the park board, in the light of what's happened at the Hebrew Cemetery, are we looking at security as well at Oak Grove? Are we looking at security cameras? Are we looking at the possibility of security issues?
So we've upgraded our security at several of our departments. So we have cameras at DPW now where we didn't in the past. We have cameras at the facilities maintenance garage where we didn't in the past. So we've made those upgrades in certain areas, and we're certainly looking at putting a security system at Oak Grove.
In Oak Grove.
I think it's too expansive for us to be able to cover the entire cemetery, but if you can cover the entrances and exits, at least you know who's coming in and who's going out. And that'll help. So we are definitely exploring.
There were some recent modifications to just the entry points, so the vehicular entrances have been closed down on the evenings, so I believe in the very recent past, the gate on Prospect Street was left open, but now that's closed in the evening by the police officers.
Well, you
and
know what the
opening.
old story was? I don't know if you've ever heard this, but I brought that question up because I live on the other side of Oak Grove, and I walked Oak Grove Avenue, and in the evenings when that gate was opened, like at 8 o'clock at night, I'd close the gates, I would close the gates. And the police department oftentimes had a vehicle that would come by and station themselves there around that time. So as far as I understand, the reason for those gates being opened, as long as they are, is because it goes back to the initial reason for the cemetery, which was to have family members come in, walk in. This is Civil War period. So family members could come and walk any time they wanted to. So it might be necessary, as the director of the cemeteries, to look into that, to see if there's a reason.
The gates at the top at Prospect Street are opened until sundown. Usually the police come by around 8, somewhere between 8 and 9, depending on what other work they're doing.
Sundown goes to 8 o'clock at 8 and, in the summertime,
Right.
those are long hours.
Right.
So, as I said, there might be a reason in the historic documents of Oak Grove as to why those gates have to be open.
Sure.
And I think it goes back to the original concept that there were widows coming and walking and needed to come in and out because they weren't using vehicles the way we are today.
Right.
So,
And then the gates on Oak Grove Avenue close, they're only open Monday through Friday, 7 to 3 when staff is there. So on
Okay.
holidays and weekends, those gates should be locked at all times. So that only provides one-way entry for
Okay, very good.
vehicles. So that was a security
I'm
improvement there.
concerned about security, and I'm concerned about the hours that typically, in other cemeteries, they're usually closing at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and yet Oak Grove's been wide open,
Right.
into the evening hours, and that constitutes an invitation, for trouble.
In the winter, they've been locking the gates, because I live right near there and drive by there a lot. And in the
Mhm.
winter, they lock the gates earlier. Once the sun goes down, the gates on
Yeah.
Prospect Street
Yeah,
are locked. It's not until 8 o'clock.
Sundown is generally the rule, and as you said, in
Yeah.
the summer hours, that can stretch to 8 o'clock. Our guys go home at 3, so unfortunately, we depend on the Fall River
Yeah,
Police
that's the
Department to
normal
lock
workday.
them. Right, exactly. So, but unfortunately, they're strapped for manpower just like everybody else. So if they're on a call or that particular car that comes to lock up can't get there exactly at 8, it may be 9, it may be 9:30. And if it's open, the folks around Oak Grove are always, willing to give us a call and say, hey, the gate was left open. And then, Chris or myself or somebody from the cemetery would go by and lock it. But,
Yeah,
that's something with the
again,
security cameras would
again,
actually, yeah.
These things you don't expect to happen, and they do happen, and I'm referring again to Hebrew Cemetery.
Yeah.
It's a wake-up call. It's just like what we're going to discuss later with St. Anne's.
Yeah.
What did we learn? What did we learn from Notre Dame in 1982? What are we going to learn from Notre Dame in Paris yesterday?
Yeah, unfortunately, this society we live in has changed a lot since you were a child, and more, since I've been, and it'll continue to evolve, and we have to evolve with it and make the
And the
changes we need to.
cemetery issues you have today are very, very important, so I wish you the best with it, and we'll help you there to plant trees.
Thank you so much.
So
Yeah,
my concern is just, is to what Rick was saying about that one section in the front, how it's just this straight, flat thing.
Mm.
And my concern is any expansion that we do is gonna end up looking like that, but also, what I also related to as far as another cemetery is in Notre Dame Cemetery, and the new section that they built, and it's just, granted, they have sort of the windingness to the streets, but it's just row upon row upon row of all the same standard size graves mostly, and there's nothing park-like to that. And even the old section of Notre Dame looks a little more park-like, but it wasn't specifically designed in the same way that that Oak Grove was designed to be like Mount Auburn Cemetery, and it was supposed to be a park. So I think definitely adding trees and things like that is gonna help, but I just really, I hate the thought of it ending up looking like Notre Dame and just rows and rows of graves
So,
with nothing.
I want you to, excuse me, but I want you to be rest assured that we're working with you,
Mhm.
not
Oh, yeah.
against you.
Yeah, no, we can
We're
see that.
working
Yeah.
with you
Yeah, we can
truly.
feel that, yeah.
And we really want to see you expand to the best of your abilities as a city, but we also would like to intrude and get some historic replication in this park so that it maintains some semblance of its originality.
Sure.
You know, and we'll go out of our way to do whatever we can to work with you.
Right.
Believe
Thank
me,
you.
I don't want to appear negative,
No.
because that's not wrong.
not
No,
would
we
take-
just have concerns, and so one of my other concerns, there's a restriction right now on grave heights.
Great Stone Heights?
Of stone heights.
Yep.
Where in the past, part of what made it park-like and historic-looking was people were allowed to put up really impressive monuments.
Yeah,
And,
and those have kind of gone by the wayside these days.
but just the idea that
Just
if,
financially to
but if
purchase one of
somebody,
those.
but if somebody wanted to, would they not be allowed to because something like that
As far as the
would be-
rules are constituted now, there would be a prohibition on those larger monuments. So one of the challenges of Oak Grove Cemetery, and one of the challenges of a lot of historic cemeteries in Massachusetts, in what DCR published, is that some of these cemeteries span a great number of years of active service, as well as different philosophies of cemetery. So Oak Grove Cemetery was first designed as that rural cemetery like Mount Auburn. Mount Auburn stuck to that plan, where you see Oak Grove very quickly after it opened kind of modified to that lawn park design in response to cities opening new parks in their cities as a better means of recreation. So this area here, where we're looking to do another expansion in here, so this, it's Rock Maple Ave and Pyrus Ave. This is a zoomed-in version of the map we have of the existing plots. This was part of the original section of the cemetery. In fact, grave number 2371, which is in this corner here, their first interment in that lot was in 1884, 29 years after Oak Grove Cemetery opened. So 29 years after they opened, they started forming these straight lines, and it continued probably at a detriment to the overall appeal of the cemetery, but it was part of the philosophy change.
Right.
So part of the thought process change at that same time too was moving away from those family plots and to a more unified grave system. And it's seen in a lot of cemeteries, not just in Oak Grove. So I think that's where the stones of, tremendous height are going to be a challenge, because the family plots aren't there.
Yeah.
A lot of those plots, like the Borden plot, there's somewhere around 20 graves in that family
right.
plot that they owned, and they took a massive portion of that lot to pour a foundation and install that huge spire,
Right.
which we don't really have the space for, and the lots aren't really laid out that way anymore. So I think that's part of the challenge.
But it's not to say that, you're gonna let it happen for everybody, or that anybody even would. But
Right.
just when you have all the stones look exactly the same, and they're the same height and the same shape, and there's no trees, there's no shrubberies, there's no anything, then you
Right.
get that
Yeah.
really just,
Right, so to my
Sort of
point
generic
earlier, so,
look, yeah.
there's one fact that'll come up with the future expansion. That's something that we could discuss, and
Yeah.
that would be vetted out, and, if that was something that was chosen to present to the park board, we'd have to put that before them to change the rules and the guidelines and things of that nature, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's why we need this time to be able to get to that point.
There's some decent space left in Oak Grove. So along here, this is the New Boston Road side. There's probably about 50,000 square feet
There's
here
a lot of
of
space,
space
yeah.
to expand. Over here where the label is, there's also some space here that the cemetery owns before the house is on
No, is that pretty,
Locust.
Oak
is that
Grove
rock?
and-
Is that
Locust.
a lot of ledge
You-
there?
you- From Oak Grove Ave back, you have some open space that we'd be able to plant, and inevitably you do hit that ledge, and that rises to that
Yeah,
next
yeah.
level of the
Right.
cemetery
But
as you go
I
back.
think that's where, when we have the 5 years instead of 2 years, we can really dig into
Right.
these areas and start, designing those meandering paths along the ledge where we can't enter up the pre-existing topography of those areas and kind of try to maybe surround the squared-off parts of the cemetery with that original design.
So maybe have a section of the expansion project that will be more in line with the Olmsted design, you know what I mean?
That would be-
Because
yeah.
of, as Chris said, the topography of it, it's a necessity for us to do, so it's a benefit of a byproduct that we have to work around, that would work for everybody.
The columbarium thing that you have in here, are you able to bring
Yes.
that up, the picture of it?
Yep. So that's one photo of the unit. That's just a freestanding unit.
Right.
Yep.
So it was the other one
The
that you
park-like
had.
ones, the ones that
Oh.
have like the
So
circles.
you wanna see the
Yeah,
landscape?
'cause it's nice,
It is,
yeah,
and
it is.
and that's
I
pretty.
mean, it's nice
Is
as a
that what
crematorium
you're
can be.
looking
Yes.
to do?
We're looking to do something along those lines.
Yeah, that's kind of-
We've
see,
had a
that's-
couple contractors come out and start looking at what the work would entail.
Yeah.
Just internally, the discussion has been using some of the reclaimed cobblestone
Right.
from various parts of the city as a walkway
Yeah.
to kind of tie in the historic material, something that's
benches.
already been here in the
Correct.
city.
Correct,
Um,
so we
See,
want.
that
area.
So
would
you-
be,
You're
yes.
gonna take a
perfect.
columbarium,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
isn't historic, but it's beautiful,
Right.
as you can see. And we're gonna surround it with historic Fall River granite, Fall
Right.
River cobblestones, the cobblestones that
So-
made our
But
street
it
so
gives it,
just
it gives it that
to
park-like
blend
look,
history
you know,
and the
that's-
future together.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the
That's-
Historic Commission is trying to do with every project you have,
Right.
right?
And the
You
column-
understand that,
Sorry.
you know, things change as you go forward,
Oh, yeah.
but you want to remain and retain some of that history
Sure.
with it
Right.
at the
And you
same
can
time.
still implement the more modern materials.
Correct.
And still get that culture.
Yes.
It's a culture, I think, that we're looking to maintain.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
you know.
Yeah.
So the columbarium that we are planning to purchase is completely composed of granite. There's a lot of columbarium dealers out there and manufacturers who use, they'll clad it in granite, but the interior will be made out of cement board or aluminum. So we wanted to make sure that the units we're purchasing are completely granite. Again, it's a historic material. Fall River has a tie to granite. We're not throwing something steel clad in granite in Oak Grove. That we're using something that, while it's a modern interment method, while it's a modern conception, it still has some historic material.
And
to
as
it.
it ages, it'll pick
Yeah.
up more of that.
Oh, yeah.
Enhance
Right.
more of that, which is.
Exactly.
And there's a number of historic cemeteries that have actually turned to these as well. I provided a list of 3 that I could find really quickly. So Princess Hill opened in 1728. They have a columbarium garden. Vine Lake in Medfield opened in 1651. They've gone through a number of expansions. They've installed columbariums. And in Fairhaven, they've also done it as well. So there's a number of cemeteries that have
So
done
we
this.
could
and-
go take a look at that.
Absolutely.
But it's impressive that
It
you're
is.
moving in that direction. You know, it's been kind of
Stop.
disheartening over the years, but it's great to see this happening.
Yep.
And again, you're never going to be able to revisit what was done in the 1800s.
Correct.
We realize. it.
And
It's just how you mesh
Blend
the
it.
past
Get
and
the
the
culture.
present and the future together.
Absolutely. Listen, Chris has done yeoman's work on this. He's done an extensive amount of research. He's put together multiple packets like this for different stages that we've been at. I give him complete credit for where we're going, and for us as a duo, the historic significance of the cemetery is not lost on us. You know, my first job for CETA, which isn't even around anymore, was at Oak Grove Cemetery, and I've
No, I was
appreciated.
around for CETA back in
Yeah,
the
but it's
70s.
not around anymore.
I know.
Yeah,
And-
so, but, I mean, I loved it there then. I mean, and if you appreciate things like that, you just do and you always do. So it's not lost on us. It's something that, as we understand, we need to do this in order to allow the cemetery to thrive and survive. And you brought up North earlier, Ms. Rodriguez. If we allow this cemetery to close and we don't expand, Oak Grove will be like North
Yeah.
at some point. Okay, it'll just be a tract of land that people used to go to. It used to be beautiful. You used to see a lot of activity, and it won't be like that anymore. So this is going to allow us to get there, and it's going to allow us to have that conversation going forward
Well,
and
you
how
have
we.
the trees and you have Friends of Oak Grove, you have
Right.
expertise in that area.
And after this project is underway and kind of almost complete. I hope to come back soon with some preservation ideas too, working to
Well, you've
fix
already
some of
done
those
the
other.
great work of the gates.
I wasn't here for that, but.
Yeah,
it
that was an extensive project that,
Yes,
yes, yes.
So, I mean,
Yep, important.
that
You'll have your
in
gates.
itself
Yeah.
speaks to where you want to go.
Yeah.
The fact that those gates were architecturally designed and the funds were allocated and the work was done, and saved those gates and saved the entrance, that speaks to where we want to go.
And as I said earlier, I mean, unfortunately, sometimes negative things happen, unfortunate things happen, right? But as we say for everything, you know, I try to take some good out of it. And due to that controversy we had a few years ago, again, it's really shined a light on Oak Grove and its significance and how important it is to the community, how many people it's touched over the lives. I've heard, I can't tell you how many people have said, you know, I used to walk that cemetery to and from school. We lived around the corner, it was somewhere we always went.
Exactly right.
There are so many people that are touched by there, and I bet you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who's a native Fall Riverite that doesn't have somebody that's connected to them in some way interred at Oak Grove. So, I mean, it matters to all of us.
So get the trees, get the security cameras.
Where is the columbarium going to be? What's the location?
Our plan is to put it up by the office for security reasons. There's also that open space between the office and the holding tomb, and we thought it was a nice tie into, you know, some of that historic piece and putting something modern there and using that space as interment space, but rather than filling it up with headstones and traditional burials, that we create a garden there.
Is this being designed for expansion?
It is. So
Yes.
the layout we're going with is about a 40-foot path with a circular ring. And the way it's laid out, the initial purchase is going to be 3 units, and if we get to a point where we need more, that design should be able to accommodate another 10 units there. So the outlay of money to set up that pathway and the landscaping is being intentionally done for an expansion there.
And that's a good thinking, because cremation is becoming,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is.
Yeah,
It really
I
is.
put some
Lots of
information in there
reasons,
too. The United States is at 51% cremation rates.
wow.
It
Yeah.
doesn't always translate to burials, but it's a trend that continues to rise as the cost of a traditional burial
Absolutely.
explodes.
Now, did you reach out to Mass Historical Commission? Because I know, because it's on the National Register.
I did. I spoke to them both about the expansion as well as the columbarium project.
Okay.
And they said nothing we're doing triggers any involvement on their end. They said usually it wouldn't get involved unless they had a specific preservation restriction, which they don't, or if we're using federal or state historic grant money.
Okay, makes sense.
great job, guys. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
so
for
much.
the
Thank you.
work. Thanks for coming over.
Thanks for having us.
That's
learned
it.
so
Now you can go
much.
home and have a glass of beer.
I'm looking forward to it, actually. Okay, guys, thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Good night.
Okay. All right, so we
So it
will,
doesn't look like we have the St. Anne's update.
well, I have just a little bit, I mean, I had heard an update, but we'll get back to the original order.
Okay.
And then, can I get a motion to go back to our original order?
Make that motion.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So advisory review, we have, so nominations, revisions to the following Register of Significant Structures, we have none, but keep your eyes peeled in case there's anything that you see. Okay, B, PowerPoint presentation for neighborhood groups. So we had our inaugural presentation at, it was 2 weeks ago, on Wednesday, and it was to the Lower Highlands Neighborhood Association, and Joyce was there in the audience,
Yes, that was.
and it seemed to go really well. We had about maybe a dozen or so people. They seemed to be very attentive, and they were listening to what we had to say, and I think they were probably a little surprised to hear, some of the things that we do, because I still feel that there is a misperception out there of who we are and what we do, so this just gets the word out to them. And also, I did give a handout about the difference between the four groups, being the Historical Commission, the Historic District Commission, the Preservation Society, and the Historical Society, because it's
a lot of them.
It's amazing how, everybody sees them as sort of one conglomerate, which they're not. So I did have a handout for that, and the only glitch was that the projector wasn't working, so we couldn't put it up there, but I had my little laptop, and Carrie did make handouts, so we did give them out to everyone.
You
so-
made them, I printed them for
Well,
you.
printed, okay, so she put the packets together, and so everybody got the handouts, and we're gonna be doing that again. So next
24th.
Wednesday, the 24th, we're going to the Flint, we're gonna present to the Flint Neighborhood Association, so Patty's gonna be joining me at that one, and then we are going to be scheduling some other groups.
I've got a question about the presentations in general.
Mhm.
Have we thought anything about accommodating other languages when you get out there? Is there an interest, and we have the capability of maybe providing somebody, if another language like Spanish or Portuguese is required in the audience? Do we need to consider that? And that doesn't mean that we have to,
I hadn't
that
thought
we
of
have
that.
to.
No, I think that's a great idea.
translate,
Yeah.
that we have to translate what we have, but maybe to have someone available who can summarize as we go along.
I think if you had, with the handouts, I mean, the way that the PowerPoint presentation was done after we spoke, there's things that you can put up on the slides that are just, kind of like prompts, but it's really the notes that are, that you're speaking from, and there's really no reason why we couldn't create, it doesn't have to be the full presentation, but something that can be easily translated. I do it all the time with the program that I do in New Bedford. We translate everything into 4 languages, and there are people who will either do it for us, or you just do it on Google Translate, which isn't always the best, but
But it
How
gets
many
the point
what
across.
languages are they working in with New Bedford?
we work with Creole, we work with Portuguese, Spanish, and English, of course. That's the one I do. But yeah, so I translate the materials that I have for this garden program that I work. It's pretty easy. I mean, but it's definitely not, we're not going to give a whole packet, but the top line, like just if you're going to come to the meeting, a top line, and then it would be nice to have somebody there that could answer those questions, but I personally don't speak any other language other than English, so that would really have to be like a volunteer almost.
Right.
Not one of us, unless there is somebody here who knows
Right.
multiple
Well,
languages.
I think at Flint, you'll,
Carlos
Carlos
will-
will definitely
yeah.
be an assist in that
Oh, God, yeah.
presentation.
If there's a need for it as well, and that's the thing too. And I mean, that's actually a good question that I can ask when I'm scheduling the neighborhood groups. Is there a need for something in another
Right.
language? Let me put this.
Because in Portuguese and Spanish are fairly easy to find those translations, but are there other people in the
Right.
population, the neighborhood groups would know what the ethnic makeup of their neighborhood would be? Is there a
Right.
need for us to pursue a different one? But that's
Yeah.
great,
And
that's a great
also,
observation.
Because I mean, usually the neighborhood group coordinator would know who usually shows up to their
Exactly.
meetings and if there's a need,
Exactly.
so that's a
That's
good
great.
question. And I know, like, in the Flint, Carlos would be able to translate if there's a need for Portuguese,
Mhm.
but, yeah.
And of course, you could just give him the document ahead of time, so he'll be ready to follow along with you and just provide any assistance.
Mhm.
I suspect he'll be able to jump in on some of the Flint.
Oh, yeah.
He may be up there with you.
Yeah, so when I did the Lower Highlands group, the pictures that we had in the presentation, I geared them toward the Lower Highlands, and it was all buildings, either buildings that had been renovated fully, buildings that were in the process of being renovated, and then buildings that could be renovated but haven't been or may just be starting. And as it happened, one of the people that was there in the audience was one of the developers that's doing the the old Durfee Tech building. And so he was able to say a few words as well. He just happened to be there for the meeting. So it was nice to have that. And I said, oh, we have a picture of your building in our
That's
thing.
great.
So when it's the Flint, I'm working now on switching out the
Mhm.
pictures to up in the Flint, and then it'll be, each neighborhood it's gonna be geared toward.
I think that's
to that,
that's
so.
great that it's so specific, and I
Yeah.
think it's like it kind of just adds to the neighborhood pride. And there are always going to be people in the audience who may know something about the
Oh,
village.
absolutely.
We may learn things that will
Yeah.
add color to our presentations or stories or whatnot. So that's really awesome.
Yeah, the one that you saw was the one for the south end.
Mm-hmm.
So that one's all set to go, and then, like I said, we'll switch
Great.
it up.
Thank you,
That's
Kristen, for all that work on that.
Sure, and thank you in advance.
That's the 24th of May.
That's.
No, next week.
24th of
April.
of
Oh, wow.
April,
Yeah,
yeah.
next
Yeah, we
week.
had two in April. I don't have any scheduled in May yet, but I'm working on getting at least one scheduled. I'm hoping for either Niagara or the North End. So I'm gonna reach out to both of them.
Are we limiting to neighborhood groups, or are we expanding to other areas?
For now, we're doing the neighborhood groups, and then we'll see, we'll visit how that's going and where there might be another
Mhm.
need, because someone had brought up to me, someone who was there, she was actually a representative of Carol Fiola, had said it would be a nice idea to have a presentation that we could actually do at some point to the schools, like to
Oh,
the,
yeah, that'd be
to the
great.
higher grades in the schools. So that's something that we definitely
I love
need to
that.
think
I
about
love
in the
that idea.
future. But I think right now, we
Absolutely.
need to sort of
Absolutely.
start
And I was thinking
small
of
and then,
church groups as well, so if you do get into areas.
Oh, there's lots of ways you could customize
Right.
this for different, that's a great
And that-
idea.
And that
Yep.
would get
Maritime.
into language issues
Yeah.
as
Mhm.
well. And I'm talking about everybody here, I'm not talking about just Spanish and Portuguese. How about Khmer? How about
oh,
anyone with a
right,
Khmer?
absolutely.
Oh, yeah, I mean, see, I'm not,
Yeah.
every city's got a really unique
Right.
makeup of the ethnicities and the cultures, and so, yeah,
I
absolutely.
think across the board, we want to get as many groups
Mhm.
into this presentation as we
Right.
can.
And the other thing too is we could also do presentations at some point in some of the elderly
Oh, yeah.
high-rise complexes
Absolutely.
and that, just to,
Absolutely.
I mean,
It's a great way to mine
they've lived the
information.
history of the
They-
city.
They will know
So
more than we
obviously,
know.
yes, they will.
That's like it's mining information, it's preserving
Yeah.
history in a different way, preserving like stories
Right.
in an oral history rather than a physical history.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely, we got a lot ahead of us.
Yeah, it's
do,
fun.
and I think
it's great.
we're on the right path, which actually speaks to the next thing.
Nice
Do we
segue.
have anything else to say on that?
No,
Okay,
thank you.
so, moving on, so we have the Historical Commission and the Historic District Commission merger. So that is in the works. I did reach out to Steve Long, who is the councilman who's in charge of the ordinance committee, and I did ask him if he would sort of fast track that and put that on their agenda, which he did, and it's even more vital now that we have it done, because we actually only have 4 people on the commission because Tony Dias has stepped down, so now we have 4 people. And we were gonna have a meeting after this, and we weren't able to because we don't have a quorum, because if only one person's gone, we can't have a meeting. So it is important that we have this merger happen. And I did also speak with Kathy Amaveris, and I sent her some information as far as what the ordinances are, so that Corporation Council can look that over. And I know, I'm gonna let Rick talk a little bit, because he did attend that meeting. It was the night that we were doing the Lower
Right,
Highlands
right.
presentation, and that was going on, so Rick did very graciously go to that meeting for us and represent us, so
No,
if you wanna.
you've done a good job. There was, I just presented why.
Yeah, no, and
I made the presentation, and Kathy Ann also had a lot of information,
Mhm.
and it was gracefully accepted, and there was no opposition. Actually, there was a lot of favorable comments. And Attorney Macy was called out at the time, And all he did was ask that the ordinances be reviewed to make sure that we were in compliance with the governing laws for the two organizations. And once that was going to be accomplished, then it looks like it's
Yeah.
a goal.
And I did send that to Kathy Ann, who said she was gonna forward that to Judge Macy. He was on vacation for a couple of weeks, but.
He's off for a month.
Yeah.
He was
that's-
leaving that Friday.
Right,
So
but-
he's still out for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so but I think she said too, there may be somebody else that would look at it as well,
He's
so.
still in contact.
Yeah,
He did say he was going to be in
Right.
telephone contact, so
Right.
it should not be held up at all.
no, and I mean, it's not so urgent that we have to have it done immediately, but the sooner we have that done, the better, because then not only are we in compliance with the city charter, but it just makes it easier for, even just for everybody to come to one meeting instead of,
Yeah.
you know, okay, well, you're gonna come to the meeting at 7, but then we run late and everybody, so we have one committee, we have the same goals, that both committees really have the same goals, and now it just falls
Mhm.
under the one umbrella, and then we have the whole group of us, and I think it's a little more cohesive, because we are all,
I think there's a lot of
Doing the same
overlap,
thing.
and I think, you know.
There really
I did-
is.
So it seems like this is a good, effective, efficient way to go about it.
right?
And those people, the 4 people well, who's the 4 people that's on that commission?
Well, 3 of us are
Are here.
here, and
Well, there
so
you go.
the other one is Catherine Kenny.
That's right, yes. Oh, that's
So,
great. I think
yeah.
that makes perfect sense.
So, yep. So,
Thank
so
you
that
for
is
following
in the
up.
works, and any updates I have, we'll bring to the next meeting.
Great, thank you.
Okay, moving on, D Scenic Roads. Larry that's Larry's little project, so, and
Mhm.
he is not here tonight, so the next time, we'll get an update from Larry on that. So E, Oak Grove Cemetery, North Burial Ground, Park Cemetery Subcommittee update. I think we're just gonna probably call that just Oak Grove Cemetery, North Burial Ground update rather than the Park Cemetery Subcommittee update, because as of right now, they don't have a cemetery subcommittee anymore. But we are waiting, when Larry and I met with the mayor, he did say that he was going to recommend Rick Mancini for the open position on the park board, because we were supposed to have representation, and then that, of course, was
Mhm.
taken away. So he did say that he was gonna send that down to the city council for their approval. Since that time, the city council actually hasn't met, other than to the big combined meeting they had with the school committee.
Yeah.
They haven't had a regular meeting, so I'm waiting to see for the next meeting if that's gonna be on the agenda, and if not, then I will reach out to the mayor again, but he did say that he was gonna send that down, so that we will have the representation again on the board. And then we'll know a little more, but as far as Oak Grove Cemetery and North Burial Ground, I think we did get a very good update
Yes.
tonight, so,
And they seem to be on board with continuing to provide updates, so I think
Yeah.
that will stay on.
yeah, so we'll just keep that on, it's just Oak Grove Cemetery and North Burial Ground. Kennedy Park benches letter to Mass Historical Commission, and the one after it, Mass Historical Commission, Fulton Parks renovation project. I think, until we straighten out the having somebody on the
Yeah.
park board so that we have a representative, I think we can keep this on here, but there's really nothing that we can have done moving forward. And even I haven't done much on that, because I've been working on the neighborhood presentations.
I think it makes sense to
So-
table it until Rick can get on there and get ensconced, and and then we can figure out how to even position that letter, or what we want to say, or what the update is.
Yeah,
So-
because at that point, then you'll be able to talk to Nancy about
Mm-hmm.
finding that little letter, so, and then we see what we want to do moving forward from there. So, and if at some point we want to revisit what, we had talked about in the past about benches, and maybe see if we still feel that way, or if we want to, move in a different direction or whatever, then we can do that, once we see what's going on.
Absolutely.
Sounds great.
Okay, signs
Oh,
on historic properties. I know that's again something that is sort of on the back burner.
Maybe, no,
and-
maybe we could put this to bed.
Okay.
What I did is probably 3 months ago, I went out and I did some investigation on signs. And I took a lot of Main Street and old photos and Pleasant Street, and I put them together. And I'll tell you, I went looking for them quickly today, and I don't know where they are. They're somewhere in my pile of stuff. It's 3 months. But maybe I can give you a breakdown, and we can maybe put this to bed if we want to. If not.
Absolutely.
All right. What I did is in the photos, there is every conceivable sign out there. There were signs on canopies, on the old crank-down canvas canopies,
Yep.
signage. There's signage extending off the building in a vertical fashion, some in a horizontal fashion. There's others up against the building. You name it. And if we're looking for historic signage, it appears that just about everything under the sun flew in those days.
I've noticed that too when I look at old pictures, and that was something that I was thinking. I mean, you have neon signs on the big buildings. Like even if you look at the Academy building, from what it was, if you look back even 30 years ago, it's like all over the place. And so I think the way that
We're concerned with
building
lighting
department
on
doesn't-
signs today,
Wow.
and what we do is we reduce, it's in our city ordinances,
Right.
that you reduce the
The
lumen
lumens.
value
Mhm.
at sunset, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, if you look at the signage of years ago, there's gooseneck fixtures with bulbs shining down.
Oh, yeah.
There were gooseneck fixtures with lights
This
shining
is
up.
like Vegas.
Yeah.
It's just, and, yeah, it's just
Yeah.
They weren't worried about
everywhere, and
energies.
everything went.
Right.
So if we're looking to what was,
Yeah.
then we could, it's not good. We're gonna have to pretty much, and hopefully when this new, if this funding gets sent through the Preservation Society, and we get that rendering of signage and buildings
Yes,
and things.
in the
that-
guidelines, yeah.
All those guidelines are going to be of such value to us.
They really will.
Yeah.
They will.
So until that time, we're just going to have to fly with good common sense until we get those particular documents. Because anything seemed to go back in the 1900s, 1800s, whatever you could conceive, you were able to install. And I'm sorry I didn't, I had
No,
like 3 or 4 photos of.
But that is,
various
I think we've all
signage.
seen the photos, so
Okay.
we know what you're talking about.
Thank you.
But no, thank you for doing that.
You'll find them
So-
now. Right after this meeting, after we
Yep.
take it off the list, you'll find them.
Okay.
So can we remove this then?
Yes,
And the next
I
one,
say we
okay.
can.
All right, Patty says we can.
Yes. I say we can.
All right, so 1 Weaver Street, preserving the smokestack. I don't know if any of you had seen in the Herald News, so there was an article. So I did get a call yesterday from one of the reporters of the Herald News, Peter Jasinski, and he was asking, he says, I was looking at your agenda and there was something that caught my eye and I was curious about, so he said, I was wondering if you could answer some questions, and he asked about that, preserving the smokestack. And so he did write a little piece, I said why we thought it was important and how we are going to be reaching out to STAR. And I know right now their project is sort of in a holding pattern because I know that what they had wanted to do there was denied, so I believe they're moving forward with that. And then I don't know what'll happen with the property, but I think still it's a good idea to reach out, because if they do move forward with it, then, it's important to.
Our intentions will already
Yeah.
have been conveyed.
So, and if they, obviously if they don't and they sell the property, then
Then we'll
we
have a
can
letter
reach
to
out
send to the next
new-
person.
Right. So,
Okay.
that's it, but So we got a little bit out there again, so hopefully people will see
I
that.
thought that was
and-
great. I
and
thought
start
it was
thinking.
good. And there's been a lot
Yeah.
of great posts on the Facebook activity I've seen in the last couple weeks has really picked up. There's been a lot of
Mhm.
stories of historic preservation, not only here in New Bedford and other cities. So I think
Yeah.
the more that we can get those out and share them, and it's good to kind of keep that on people's minds.
Yeah, and it really, I think maybe finally people are starting to realize why historic preservation is important. And if you look to places like New Bedford or Newport and people that really have done preservation well,
Mhm.
and people can see, it's a tremendous boost to the local economy. It's such a great, it's such a great tool for just growing your
It's a
city.
whole area of tourism. People come specifically for historic
Yeah.
experiences. Look at all Moby Dick, the whole,
Right.
thing that they have going on, Frederick Douglass and the Underground Railroad, and we have a lot of those same things,
We do, and
Um,
we don't promote it. We need to get better at promoting it. And I think we slowly are, and I think people are slowly starting to wake up and realize.
Absolutely.
And I
Absolutely.
think one of the conduits for that is, again, a segue into our next section. If we go, so moving on to new business, St. Anne's Church status update. And St. Anne's Church, I think, was a big eye-opener for people to realize, hey, we could lose this, and this is so iconic to our city, and how can we imagine our city without this? And so it rallied people around this church, and they started a group, St. Anne's Church Preservation Group.
Well, I
And,
think the tragedy in Paris has had a fantastic impact, because when you have the president of France talking about the soul of my city
Yes.
being
Mhm.
destroyed,
Right,
and we're looking at the same kind of language that we've been using with St. Anne's. It's a
Absolutely.
cultural and an emotional connection that we have.
it is.
And it's, I think people
It's-
can understand even more so.
Oh, yeah.
When they see what's going on in France.
Mhm.
And the lesson learned from Notre Dame in 1982.
And it was very strange.
I know the interesting parallels.
The way that it happened in very similar ways of
Yes.
renovations, and then,
Yes.
It was interesting to
But-
see so much, like, the coverage was not just factual, it was like they reprinted the letter from, I think, believe his name was Bishop Cronin, was it, at the time? That just
Yeah,
like,
Daniel
just the
Cronin.
coverage today that I've been reading is very emotional and thoughtful about, people's pride and tradition and historic structure,
Right.
and cultural, what that means to a culture. So I think it's a really interesting time
Not
for.
to avoid the fact that there were whole neighborhoods destroyed.
Oh, yeah,
As well as the
absolutely,
Notre Dame,
absolutely.
yes.
But you had neighborhoods, you had
Yeah.
you did,
Mm-hmm.
homes leveled.
right?
It's the kind of thing that I brought up earlier when this first came up about fire protection in that building, and I'm still not quite sure that
Oh, yes.
we got the right answers.
Yeah.
So that will come up again, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see, I've obviously read some of the articles, but I haven't heard any new updates, so perhaps they could.
On St. Anne's?
Yeah.
Well, I
Who knows?
actually, when Larry and I met with Mayor Correa, he did give us an update.
Oh.
And he said that the diocese agreed to lease the church, lease the building to
Wow.
the St. Anne's Preservation Group for, I believe it's $1 a year for, I think he said it was a 30-year lease.
Wow, that's.
And they're hoping to get donations and just in-kind work, having people do work.
That's great.
To have that open, and they're planning on doing something downstairs in the shrine first.
Sanctuary.
And then they're going to do some fundraising down there and have like a gift shop, I guess, and selling things to raise
That's really
funds.
great.
But the church is willing to work with them, and that now they're kind of taking that part over.
Hmm.
So.
I remember the gift shop when the Dominicans ran it.
Mhm.
So that was a good income maker.
Yeah, it was always open.
There was
There were
always
always
a gift
people
shop
in and
there.
out. And I think too, when you have people coming, I mean, you have tour groups that come, and especially when you have the Holy Ghost and then the church was open and you'd have tour groups, and
Mhm.
I'm sure there's lots of people that would buy souvenirs from the church then. And
Absolutely.
even just people that go there, and I think too, with what you heard about Notre Dame in Paris, where people were saying that, yes, it's religiously, it's an important building, it's the significance, but also just to the city itself,
Mhm.
for what the building is and how it is iconic because of the image of it and you know, the spire and the towers, and it's the same thing with St. Anne's, where it's important
It's part of the
in a
cityscape.
spiritual way for our city. It's just as important in a historic and visual way to the city, because I don't think anybody that grew up in the city can imagine that not being there, can
Absolutely.
imagine it as, you know, part of, so it really is iconic to our city in the same way, so it's great that, you know, it's great that group decided to do that, and it just goes to show what a small group of determined
Mhm.
people can do when they set their mind to it, so hopefully we have more people that decide
I
to
think that's my favorite part of it, is that there's a lot of people who were like, oh, it's gone, that's a shame, and there's just a
Mhm.
lot of like giving up, and I think it's nice to see people that actually did something.
Not giving
and
up.
hopefully other people can recognize that if you do
Yeah.
put yourself towards something, it can work out in your favor with some hard work. So I would like,
Yeah.
to, you know, just as that, I think that was a good win for a small group of people.
Oh, yeah, and social media, I think, plays a good part now in getting the word out to people, because we have groups, the Fall River Historic Photo
Oh, yeah.
Club, and just other groups, that, you know, things that aren't there anymore, and it gets people talking, and it gets people reminiscing about how much they miss these things, and, oh, I remember this, I have these good memories, and those good memories, and just people, I think, are finally starting to realize, once it's gone, it's
Mhm.
gone, you cannot bring it back. And if everything is gone, then we become just like any other city, and we have no identity anymore.
Exactly.
So it's, you know, I think we're starting to.
Yeah,
wake
I'm happy
up
to hear
and-
this. That's, yay.
So, anything else on that?
Nope.
Okay, open discussion, do we have anything?
We've been having that all night.
Yeah.
We kind of
I
have,
mean,
but well, it's been irrelevant
Yeah.
to the thing, open
Open.
discussion, but nothing new?
No?
No, I don't think
Oh,
so.
okay, so our next meeting is going to be Tuesday, May 21st at 6:30 in this room here. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
I second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.